going, everybody? Anthony back. CNN, baby. Alright, I know you guys have seen already. I started interviewing different people for different questions on their opinions. Keep up with those videos. This is season 7, episode 2. We're gonna put it like that. Okay? The last season or the last episode that I talked about was trials and tribulations. It was all sprained ankles at different times, different moments, different occasions, and it was all because of the same thing, me going back into the route where God had took me out of. I would always end up getting tips, getting buzzed, drinking over the limit, going back down the route that God took me out of. And all these different circumstances still didn't slap me and teach me a lesson, so I had to accelerate and go crazier, So literally, that's when all these trials and tribulations came my way, and I still looked forward, overcame them. And like I said, the worst sprained ankle that I had was about a month and a half. And you think I would have had it bad already. You think I was already thinking like, man, this sucks. A whole bunch of sprained ankles. I didn't sprain my ankle one single time before this accident. Well, and I remember 2018 was the year that I got with a girl. I remember she walked with the park with me. She went different places with me on the cane, and I did different things on the cane. And one of the main points that I'm getting to is that I put myself on the cane when I shouldn't have, because what happened was 2020, on top of COVID, because COVID-19 had came out, a lot of places shut down for 3 months, which was because they were small businesses or they were too accumulated with people, and they wanted everybody to stay away from each other at least 6 feet apart. And we're talking about, we cannot be in a market, in a fish market or nothing like that, because it is so crowded and so really, really squeezed, Well, that's what they didn't want, so they made sure that everybody stayed away from each other. Well, this year, besides the fact that we shut down 3 months because they didn't want nobody going out into the streets and into the stores, and if you did go into the stores, you had to listen to that 6 feet distance. On top of all that, finally, when we got out of it, I had survived COVID. We had got out of it. I didn't end up getting it, and that's when June came around. I remember we were at my uncle's house. And this is literally what tested my patience, because I'm leaving my uncle's house. I still remember my cousin's walking in front of me. My brother's a couple minutes behind me. As I'm walking out of my uncle's house, I still remember I'm taking the steps. As I go to put the cane up front, I go to take the next step. I move my right leg and get ready for the step. Now, when I go to shift all my weight to my right, at that point, that's when my right buckles. Now, I've never experienced this in my life. So when it buckles, I literally get a little jump scare. I'm like, ooh, I wasn't expecting it. So it buckles, and then when it buckles, that's when I hear, and when I hear that, I'm like, oh man. And I fall, and I'm laid out. At that point, my cousin, he's just like, oh, like he tried to grab me, but he knew like it's done. He fell. My brother comes up behind me. He's like, hey, yo, what happened? You all right? I'm like, nah, I think I broke it. And he's like, oh man, what you do? And at that point, luckily I got blessed, because God has always had me. Tell me why it ends up that my uncle had brought my grandma from El Salvador, and when he brought her, she couldn't do much. So he ended up getting a wheelchair for her, where it ends up that she ended up leaving back to El Salvador, and she passed now, God rest her soul. But She ends up going back home, and the wheelchair stayed here. So my uncle brings it out, and he's like, "Here, let's use this to get you to the car." So I'm like, "All right, sounds good." So they end up putting me on the wheelchair. They wheel me out to the car, to my cousin's car. I get inside the car. When I get inside his car, he ends up driving me to, I believe, San Martin. No, to Southern Hills, because that's where I told him I wanted to go. So when they end up accepting me into Southern Hills, I end up getting a look at on my leg. The doctor ends up telling me that yes, it's broken, and that I'm gonna need surgery. And so now I'm stuck here with a broken leg. I'm like, dang, this sucks. My leg just broke. The doctor ends up telling me we're gonna go ahead and do surgery on it. He tells me he's gonna open up that he's gonna end up putting a metal rod in there and 3 screws on the ankle. So at that point I'm like, okay. I'm like, whatever it takes to heal, whatever. Let's do it. So they end up doing that. When I get out of the hospital, now we're now we're talking about going back into rehab, being away from family, being away from loved ones, being away from my nieces and nephews, being away from my comfort zone, being away from my room, being away from my TV, my Alexa. I love my Alexa. She always plays what I want. Being away from a lot of different people that I love being around. I can't do nothing no more. And I'm stuck in a situation where I need God. I didn't know this though at that moment. I didn't know this. I would look away and I was like, man, why did this happen? And I'll start scoping out situations as to why it happened. Well, it ends up that slowly I ended up noticing I put myself on the cane, not God. It wasn't God's time. And if anything, I'm like, what God did this with this situation was make my leg unbreakable, because the right ankle was the one I was spraying every single year before that break happened. So after that break happened, let me tell you, I did not spring it again. And that's because of the 3 screws in my ankle. So I know that God protected me that way by putting metal inside my leg. So that way I could get away from a lot of other situations that I could have got into with that leg. But it ended up turning into a better situation. And now I'm like Mr. Bionic Man, but I'm unbreakable. As far as my leg, I don't got to worry about it breaking no more, because till the day I still have 3 screws in the ankle, a metal rod in my leg. And when you add everything up, I got a metal rod on my arm. I got a metal rod on my hip. I got a metal on my hip. I got 2 screws in the knee. I'll get more into that later on. And scars all over the place. But that's what I'm saying. That was when the tribulation accelerated, So 2020 wasn't only the bad COVID virus going around. For me, it was also a test of patience, because now I'm down. I can't do nothing for 6 weeks, and I gotta wait for my leg to heal, bearing no weight on it, being careful that it doesn't buckle so it will get more messed up, and having to heal it back to what it was, and going through rehab so that I could end up surpassing that rehab. And I surpassed it after being there for about 2-3 weeks. I ended up being able to go back home. I went back home, and I was in a wheelchair with my leg propped up and thinking, why me? That's where I'll leave off in this episode. All right. So I'm telling you, I had a lot of down times. I had a lot of times where I felt like committing suicide. I felt a lot of times where I felt depressed. I felt a lot of times where I felt lonely. I felt everything that all the humans feel, every emotion. I've been through it, but I keep God first, and I know that He fills up every desire that I want in my life. And as far as right now, I am happy of where I'm at, and I'm happy about how everything happened because it's just more glory for God, baby, of what He got me through. And not only that, but also makes me more of a tough person of how much I've experienced. But keep up to the next episode. Thank you so much, and God bless. All right, Anthony.